5 men and 2 women were murdered in this vicious attack, the deadliest terror attack since 2011. The 21-year-old Palestinian terrorist shot dead after a chase as the city and the country still reeling on Saturday morning. A second shooting attack in the neighborhood of Silwan near the Old City. A father and son attacked by a 13-year-old terrorist. This past hour, another shooting attack in the Jordan Valley. No casualties there. The manhunt after a terrorist is underway. Police raising the alert level all over Israel to the highest one. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu convening the security cabinet this hour, while Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza were seen celebrating in the aftermath. I-24 News teams are on-the-ground security and political analysts joining us here in studio, and we'll bring you all the live updates. So without further ado, let's cross now live to Jerusalem, where I-24 News senior Middle East correspondent Ariel Osron is standing by. Ariel, the identities of more victims from yesterday's massacre cleared for publication, and you are there on location where a protest is currently underway. Set the scene for us.
Right, Ali. So for the past few hours, more and more locals have been coming here as the press has been coming to reporting and basically voicing their frustration from what's been going on. A lot of chants of death to terrorists. Some of the neighbors here have been taking that a step further, death to Arabs. But there is a general sense of frustration with a lack of security here in the streets. And I'm joined here by a man who lives right nearby, less than a kilometer away from the synagogue Ateret Avraham, where we're standing right now. Yoshua Daitel, thank you for joining us. So we're today a day after the attack, with a lot of locals here saying that there's a general sense of lack of security, calls for increasing the security presence, making it easier for to people to acquire guns. What is your sense today, a day after yesterday's attack?
In terms of the security, the first thought I had when I heard about this morning is that how could this have happened in such a degree, such a large amount of people to get killed in a community that more or less hasn't experienced anything like this before.
So a lot of surprise, but do you share the sense of frustration that there is a lack of sense of security in the streets of Jerusalem today?
Yeah, I think so. That relatively speaking, Baruch Hashem, it doesn't happen. It should never happen. But when it does, it reminds us that perhaps it's a time to let people that live in these types of areas, or anyone in Jerusalem who wants to carry a gun and who could protect people, to allow them to do that. I live in a state in America where guns were a lot of people own guns there, and if you wanted to, you could get a license and carry it concealed, meaning you can't see it. And people with increasing crime in America, had a sense of security, being able to go out like that. I think people here, if they would be able to do that, would also have increased sense of security.
And what, besides making it easier to get a gun license, what would you like to see the government do differently amid this wave of attacks, just 2 attacks in Jerusalem within less than 24 hours?
Yeah, besides for the sense of sadness and sorrow, you have to think, or I think to myself, what could have been done to prevent this? The person was an Israeli citizen, or he lived in...
A resident, he's from East Jerusalem.
He was a resident of Israel. Even then, there has to be a way that security can somehow make, I don't know, a campaign event to, if you see something, say something. If you know something, tell someone who should know.
To remain vigilant.
It couldn't happen that this guy, this terrorist, left his house without anyone in the world knowing. It has to be more intelligence, more security in that way, trying to figure out what's going on and to prevent it. The entrance to Neve Yaakov from here is about half a kilometer, a little bit more than that. Maybe the police are right out down the street. There's an army base. And still it happened. It begs the question, are they really doing enough to employ whatever security or intelligence tactics need to be in place to figure out what's going on?
The investigation is definitely going to be looking thoroughly into this. Yoshua, thank you very much. Ellie, back to you.
Yes, 24 News Middle East correspondent Ariel Osran standing by in Jerusalem for us. And speaking to that point exactly, this past hour, National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir speaking right outside of the hospital where the wounded of yesterday's attack are currently being treated, addressing the issue of arming more civilians or allowing more civilians to obtain weapons. Let's take a listen.
There is the issue of the weapons. I want weapons on the streets. I want the citizens to be able to defend themselves. We saw it today at an attack in the city of David. When citizens have weapons, they can defend themselves. That's why I instructed my office, but I also need the assistance of the Ministry of Finance, and I will raise this in the cabinet as well. We need to bring more people to the Division for Firearms Licensing and allow us to give weapons to citizens who want and are qualified. I also want to ease the criteria. Other things, death penalty law for terrorists. I am asking to expedite the legislation. I will raise it today in the cabinet and also tomorrow in the government meeting. I want to pass the death penalty law for terrorists. In my opinion, it is appropriate and required. And one more thing, I talked throughout the week about the police reform that I want to do it. And it should be done as soon as possible. A National Guard should be formed tomorrow morning.
And for more insight, joining me now here in the studio, Colonel in the Reserves, Mr. Alon Eviatar, Palestinian Affairs expert and former COGAT advisor, Professor Yossi Yona, former Israeli Parliament member of the Labour Party, and of course Michael Kleiner, president of the Likud Party Supreme Court, and former Israeli Parliament member himself. Thank you, gentlemen, so very much for joining us this evening. We've just listened to National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir. The bread and butter of his mere political existence, I will dare to say, is the issue of national security. He insisted on transforming the name of his ministry to such, facing, let's put it that way, I'm not envious of Itamar Ben-Gvir at this point in time, needing to deliver on his long-standing political promises, now in the capacity of a minister. Not an easy task, Michael Kleiner.
I guess when he was appointed the minister, he expected that this moment will come. He had no illusions that just his appointment will deter any terrorist act. And now it's a test of his measures. He's pressing hard to fulfill and to take those measures he believes that can change the picture. So he wants to seal houses. He wants to deport families of terrorists, because which are actually terrorist families. Try to confiscate arms. Try to make it easier for Israelis to hold arms and to be able to protect themselves, like happened in the second terror act this morning. And I believe now he will get the support. I don't see anybody who will oppose it, and then we shall see what the future will bring. I believe those are reasonable acts. I am not so happy with the death penalty, but I shouldn't agree with him 100%. 80% is enough.
That's more than enough, some would suggest. In the short time we have left before we take a short break, and of course we will continue to unpack it all afterwards. Alon Eviatar, the cabinet, the security cabinet convening this evening. Should we expect anything concrete?
It's an important question because, the public, the Israeli street, waiting for steps, maybe new steps, maybe huge steps and huge impact if you want. I think that no Ben-Gvir, no Smotrich, even the others, especially those who are, it's the first time to be in the cabinet for them. I think that they will realize as soon as possible that there are no, I would say, surprises in any pocket, in any plan. There is no, if you want, magic plan also. There is a limit, and between the limits, between those, I would say, defined limits, they will try to demand
limitations
or
of
to
power.
deceive.
You learn them sooner rather than later.
This is the reality.
We're taking a 2-minute break, and we'll be back with more.
breathing organism that pulsates through millennia. Touch it, listen to it, smell it, taste it. Experience the Holy Land like never before. Holy Land Uncovered, every Sunday, only on i24 News.
Imagine being able to see into the future.
What innovations will change the world as we know it? Join us as we meet the people changing our planet and discover the inventions shaping tomorrow.
Israel Business Beat, Sundays and Wednesdays, 9:30 p.m. GMT.
The i24 News team of talented correspondents are working hard for you. They're in the markets, on the streets, in the battlefields, getting the pulse of the story. Tune in for Beyond the Headlines to see how the top stories of the week are affecting real people. No commentary, no debate, just the best stories presented by our best journalists.
We're on the inside of political and religious passions in Jerusalem, breaking down the financial trends shaping the global economy, giving you key context, not just headlines, with the stories from Israel that touch the U.S. and those across the region with impact far beyond its borders. Catch the rundown where the Middle East meets the world.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. The Security Cabinet is convening this evening, headed, of course, by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and he's speaking right now, so let you know we will get to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu later on, but the Premier did arrive at the scene last night at the synagogue, where nothing that can be described in any other way than a massacre took place shortly after the 8 p.m. holy prayer on Shabbat Eve. Let's take a listen to the Prime Minister yesterday, as we speak, he's convening the Security Cabinet.
We are here after a hard attack, one of the hardest attacks in recent years. Our hearts go out to the families of the murdered and, of course, the injured. We wish for their fast recovery. I convened now a situation assessment with all the security forces. We decided on several immediate actions. With the end of Sabbath, I will convene the Cabinet on the continuation of our reaction. I want to emphasise that we have to work with determination and with composure. I call on people not to take the law into their own hands. For that, we have an army, police and security forces, and they will work according to the Cabinet's instructions.
And as we're waiting for the Premier to speak again this evening, still with us here in studio, Colonel on the Reserves, Mr. Alon Eviatar, Professor Yossi Yona, and Mr. Michael Kleiner. Gentlemen, it's not Netanyahu's first rodeo, let's put it that way, dealing with such a security escalation. It is, however, somewhat uncharted territory when it comes to the composition of this government. Netanyahu, to an extent, the left mark of his own government, and the mere decision of arriving at the scene last night and the somewhat restrained remark we've heard, Professor Yona, perhaps an indication of that.
Mr. of Security. This is, I guess, the statement being done by Netanyahu's arrival at the scene, saying, well, this is my responsibility, even when such things, harsh things happen, as you described it, a massacre. So I think that this is the clear statement that he is in charge. I'm the boss. And so, which is, I guess, it's a positive thing for part of the Prime Minister that he's not running away from responsibility. This is one point that I want to make. Another point I want to make, which is, reiterating the obvious. Of course, I mean, there's no justifications whatsoever for such things to unfold, no matter what are the circumstances, and you know what my views about this issue. I'm not surprised, and this is the next obvious thing, that I'm not surprised that the discussion is kind of limited to security measures. Okay, now we're going to increase and to use other security more harsh and rigid security measures, and then that would be the end of it. No one believes that is going to happen. And what is the obvious thing that I want to reiterate? Just think about it. Nobody is talking about negotiation. Nobody talk about peace. As if it is now to talk about peace in Israel, it's blasphemy against sacrosanct values and ideals, sacrosanct kind of the spirit. You cannot touch the spirit. It's heresy to talk about peace. Hey guys, there's no another solution but negotiations with the other side. At the end of the day, peace negotiations. Now I'm not saying, and I'm not naive, I'm not saying that the Palestinians are ready just to embrace any peace solution that Israel would offer.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, this is the only thing that will get us, salvage us from these kind of bloody circles of violence. I mean, there's no another way, So my friend, I appreciate what my friend Michael is saying, Michael is saying about, that he's agreeing with Ben-Gvir, and what you said, and I think it's a very wise thing that now he's going to learn the limits of power. What the hell are you going to do? Because we've got to remember, these kind of attacks are not organization-oriented, sporadic, personally oriented activities that it is very, very hard to detect in advance. So these are the limitations that within which we are talking, and I think that what we need is kind of sober approach to the situation. I know that, I'm kind of, as I was saying before, wow, what are you talking about peace? We're talking negotiation, nobody to talk with. But at the end of the day, we've got to bring that back to the table. There's no other way. Rigid, harsh measures would not solve the situation, and I think that we all agree with it.
If I understand Professor Yona correct, I think that you mean that the Prime Minister or the government, this is the body that should demand the policy.
Yeah.
That should show us where is the policy, where is the strategic direction. The security organizations, the IDF, the Shabak, the police, and so on, don't need order what to do tomorrow and the day after from the government. They know what to do.
They're doing the best.
They have an organized plan and do the best. Organized plan, small, big, for short term, long term, and so on. I think this is not the question. The question is, or I would say the challenge is, what is the policy? What is the direction? Which should be right or left, right?
Yeah.
Engagement or separation or 2 states or 1 state and so on. For example, we speak a lot about East Jerusalem, okay? Wide area. More than 350,000 each. What the state of Israel want to do with East Jerusalem? It's an open question. 55 years, nobody decided about that, all right? Nobody gave us to the Israeli public what is the direction, even to them, to those residents in Jerusalem. They're sitting between 2 chairs, all right?
Yeah.
Fall down. They don't belong to. They are not belong to the PA authority and not to the Israeli cities and so on. So I think that the main question is, what is the strategic direction? What will be in the future? This is the point.
I disagree with both my friends. I believe there is a lot to do.
To be expected.
Not only on the security level, which can be improved, and the people in the army and in the police have their plans, but they need to have encouragement from the government and not trying to stop them, like the Attorney General does. That everybody was united with the police, with the Shabak, with the army, all the ministers, the Prime Minister, that the house of this murderous terrorist should have been sealed this morning, and she was dragging it until the evening. She didn't get another paper, and she got in the morning, first denies, then she said she got a paper in the morning, but she wanted to have another papers. What papers do you need? You need to seal this house. The people are murderers. The problem is in Jerusalem, by the way, is a special problem. In Judea and Samaria, we get along. Gaza tried to make something, and there was a very severe response, and they know what's good for them. We have a dialogue with the population. The living standard of the population, though there is occupation, both in Gaza and Judea and Samaria, is better than in Lebanon, in Syria, and most Arab countries.
The fact that other people are suffering more.
No, on the contrary, we are creating a position,
but
jobs.
Michael, can I ask you a question?
15,000. I will finish in a second. 15,000 people from Gaza, despite all the problems, are coming and getting work. And now East Jerusalem is a problem that, first of all, you should solve. One example and last, what can be done, which is not on the security level, demand that in East Jerusalem and in Judea and Samaria, I don't know if you can do it in Gaza, children will learn in school that terror is something bad. They're not glorifying terror, bringing a 13-year-old child to go and shoot. And not all this, with whom you will have a dialogue, with those Palestinians who were going and applauding and shooting and making haflot and happy with this murder, kill children and children and women?
Yes. I'll just like to note to our viewers, earlier we saw live images from a mass rally taking place for the fourth week in a row in Tel Aviv, despite or even because of today's attack continuing.
No, despite, you were right, despite.
To criticize the government's pending judicial reform. And now we're seeing live images from Jerusalem as a memorial, what seems to be a grassroots memorial of the local community there is taking place. Professor Yona, you wanted to respond to Mr. Kleiner's remark.
Well, I don't know what else can be done, of course.
But gentlemen, deterrence needs to be restored in the immediate level. Obviously, there is the fundamental issue of a lack of a long-term strategy or policy or outlook.
But okay, I'll try to answer it as best as I can. If you're dealing with organizations and you've got the leaders, and they would say to them, kind of indirectly, hey guys, the moment you do something, you should know that it would be the end for you. Okay, so you can understand. Okay, there's deterrence. If you do this, I'm going to do that. But now you're talking about a 13-year-old kid. And so okay, now you're going to destroy and arresting 42 members of his family. And I'm asking, logically, because no one of us want that such things would unfold, would continue to happen. What on earth you're going to achieve by now arresting these 42? As if
But something in the equation, Professor Yona, that a 13-year-old boy is making a calculation, making his own personal calculation, and deciding to head out. That it is better, that he is better off to head out and pursue a terrorist attack rather than not, means there's something in the greater scheme of things.
I might agree with you, but again, see that we are localizing the discussion, and again, we're talking about security measures, deterrence, and stuff like that. And again, like the big issue, nobody, wants to talk about it. This is a shame, really. It is in our interest at the end of the day that we talk about it. Now, Michael is saying, well, look, whom do you want to talk with? No, I'm not. I don't want to talk with the people, jovial about killing Jews. Of course, they're not the partner to talk about. But you can say, with really truly believe that you would not be able to find anybody in the Palestinian people that were willing to talk with you about compromise. Well, it is very hard for me to agree. But again, I just want to make a very important point. It is in our interest. It is in our interest. So the very answer to saying that, well, look, nobody you talk with. So, okay, what are you going to do? Well, let's expand the settlement project. I mean, that makes sense.
For example, we're speaking about the leadership of the PA. Okay, which already know the majority of them are.
By the way, not condemning the attacks this past weekend, but blaming Israel, and this is perhaps an escalation in the rhetoric of
the defensive act in Jenin.
Please.
Yeah. It was once upon a time they condemned, they stopped, but I don't think it's so important.
Okay.
But anyway, this boy, 13 years old, 15 years old, 20 years old, if you want, doesn't wait to the declarations of the PA leadership, right? He doesn't care about them. I think that the question should be, what is the alternative? Because fighting terror is obvious, is clear to everybody, to every organization, and so on. I think that even there is no difference between the right and the left generally, right? What are the ways and the instruments and the tools to fight terror? The next question, and the biggest one, is to where are we going? So I think this is the challenge of the government. It's not simple. While I was speaking about the alternative, we spoke a lot of time about the day after Mahmoud Abbas, the day after Abu Mazen, okay, the leader of the PA. It could be tomorrow morning.
Right.
All right. The next leadership will be extreme than it is.
Yeah.
So I think this is a huge challenge for us.
Okay, unfortunately, we needed to take another break now. Alona Vital, you're staying with us, and this is with great sorrow. We are saying goodbye to Michael Kleiner and Professor Yossi Yona. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your time and insight. Yes, I'm enjoying the conversation with you, believe it or not, Mr. Kleiner, and better days in Leicester. Thank you very much for this. A break, and we're back.
Esta semana en News 24, Israel Quo Vadis. Las reformas que propone el gobierno de Netanyahu dividen a la sociedad israelí y generan dudas a nivel internacional. El artista Noé Katz inauguró su obra Banca de la Amistad en la Embajada de Israel en México para celebrar los lazos de amistad y cooperación entre ambos países. El Foro de Viudas, una emisión semanal en español para ayudar y darle herramientas a personas que sufren de soledad. News 24, el magazine semanal en español de I24 News.
Better come back tomorrow. All right, let's hurry up, get them places.
Who have taken up.
If you could travel to the Middle East right now without packing and without a plane ticket, would you? We are in Tel Aviv, Israel. Welcome to I24 News Digital.
Here, we bring Israel and the entire Middle East right to your social networks.
On your phone, on your desktop. Here, I24 News creates videos especially made for social media. And believe me, we are out there working hard.
Right here.
Israel and Nepal.
For the very first time.
Is how they begin. Making original content. Streaming live, even in the hard moments.
There are literally rockets going off. I'm in a bomb shelter.
And filming docuseries. With us, you will find all the big stories you missed on television. So join I24 News on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube.
And discover the Middle East with us.
The Middle East is changing. Old alliances make way for new partnerships.
Bigger threats lead to new relationships, and shared goals mean new opportunities.
We speak to those who know the inside story.
Or those who are at the heart of the changes. Don't get caught up with the same old story.
Find out what's happening in Middle East Now.
Middle East Now, every weekday on I24 News.
One show, a whole lot of perspectives.
He is part of the problem.
You want to talk about deplatforming? People are losing their lives.
Not just what happened, but why does it matter?
I'd like to finish my point.
You're the one stretching terms here.
Join us every night, 8 p.m. Eastern on Global Live. The global conversation starts here. Welcome back to this special I-24 news coverage of the deadly weekend in Jerusalem. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu convening the security cabinet at this hour, and these are his opening remarks. Let's take a listen.
Good
evening to all the ministers. Prime Minister, on behalf of all the citizens of Israel, I would like to send my heartfelt condolences to the families of those murders in the heinous and terrible attack in our capital, Jerusalem. This is a criminal attack at the entrance of a synagogue on International Holocaust Day. I thank the President of the United States, my friend Joe Biden, who spoke with me and expressed his shock and condolences at this terrible act of murder. I also thank many other leaders, including from Arab countries, for standing by Israel at this time. We all pray for the peace of those injured in the two attacks. I would like to praise the police and the security forces for their determined and quick action, as well as the resourcefulness and bravery shown by ordinary citizens who hit the terrorists and thus saved lives. Our response will be strong, fast, and accurate. Whoever tries to hurt us, we will hurt him, and anyone who helps him. We have already carried out extensive arrests of terrorist supporters, aides, and instigators. We deploy forces, we increase forces, and we do it in different arenas. We will seal and destroy terrorist houses in an expedited procedure in order to exact an additional price from those who supported terrorism. This process already started yesterday and is in progress. I will bring to the Cabinet tonight additional measures to fight terrorism. This includes significantly speeding up and expanding gun licensing for licensed citizens. As we've seen time and time again, including this morning, this thing saves lives. Also, I will bring before the Cabinet the denial of rights and the national insurance from families that support terrorism. The government will act firmly, decisively, and powerfully against terrorism, and we will do it calmly and decisively. We are not looking for escalation, but we are prepared for any scenario. I call again to the citizens of Israel, do not take the law into your hands. We are not in the days of the underground. We have a sovereign country with an excellent army, government, and security forces. Let them do the work. Yes, this is Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the opening of the Security Cabinet convening this hour in Jerusalem, weighing in, of course, on the measures that will be taken from this point onward, some of them illustrated by the Premier in his opening remarks. Still with me in studio here, Colonel in the Reserves, Mr. Aloni Vitar, Palestinian Affairs expert and former COGAT advisor, and joining us, Samir Shinjalawi, a Fatah activist from Jerusalem and chairman of the Jerusalem Development Fund. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us. Mr. Vitar, I do want to begin with you. The last part of Netanyahu's remarks, perhaps particularly important for the second time in those past 24 hours, urging Israeli citizens not to take the law into their own hands. And security officials throughout the day were quoted as saying this is not a statement based on a hunch, but rather based on intelligence.
I think it's very important declaration of Netanyahu, to alarm everyone not to do what he wants to, despite the iron is hot, despite the negative emotions, despite the atmosphere, the bad and the negative atmosphere, and so on. It's easy to do, to respond by yourself. It's easy to hold a gun and so on. I think that the main challenge for Netanyahu and the commanders of the security organizations is to lead forward, is to go straight ahead and tell the public what to do tomorrow morning by defense and so on. Stay at home, don't go out while those terror attacks happen and so on. But the main declaration for me by Netanyahu's speech is to don't take the law to your hands. Keep calm.
And let us do.
Let us do the job. We know how to do. We know what to do. The security organizations know very well their jobs based on a long experience, and let them do the job. They have the mandate, they have the privilege, they have the capabilities, they have the authority from the Israeli government, and nobody should make or create any chaos on the street, because the beginning of escalation, what you go inside, you never know what will be in the end of the day or in the end of the process. I think that the escalation, this is the main, I would say, danger that nobody wants to get inside.
Mr. Sinjalawi, it feels like ancient history, but only 2 days ago, the Palestinian Authority announced that it's cutting the security coordination with Israel. Only short days ago, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu meeting with King Abdullah of Jordan. The chain of events here so rapid, and of course on Thursday morning, the raid in Jenin. Do you see any connecting line here, or are we talking about attacks that are disconnected from the overall atmosphere?
Well, I want, first of all, to make a statement.
Please.
Short comment on Netanyahu.
Please.
Then I will answer your question. As a statement, I should say that any innocent civilian life loss is a human tragedy on both sides. We should learn together how we should shed the same tears on any innocent on both sides. Everybody is sensitive to life losses on the Israeli side, which is important and we appreciate. But unfortunately, nobody is sensitive on the loss of lives on the Palestinian side. There is a lot of blood spilling on the Palestinian side. It's like water, and nobody is sensitive. There was civilians who were killed by the operation of the army inside Jenin, including a 61-year-old woman who was inside her home, and other incidents. So we should always be very sensitive to any human loss on both sides. As a comment on Netanyahu statement, I have two comments. One, the attack in Neve Yaakov did not target a synagogue and did not target worshippers going out of synagogues. The attack
what do you mean, Mr. Sinjalawi?
I will explain myself. The attack occurred in a street that has a synagogue, but the evening prayer, the evening Jewish prayer, starts 6:30 in the evening and ends 6:45. The attack occurred at 8:15, 1.5 hours after the end of the Jewish prayer. The intention, this does not justify anything, but we should be accurate in not linking the attack to targeting a synagogue. It was targeting civilians.
Targeting Jewish civilians in Jerusalem on the eve of Shabbat. If there wasn't a synagogue...
The motivation is not religious. The motivation is not attacking a synagogue.
So the motivation is national.
It is political, yes. Second, it does not make any justification, I say again, but we should not put it under a title of religious conflict. It is more under a title of political conflict. My second comment on Netanyahu's statement. You cannot keep doing the same thing and expect different results. Those intention to implement reaction on the families of the attackers, whether deporting them to Gaza or demolishing their homes, will lead to the next attack. And here I come to your question. These attacks are directly linked to what has happened in Shu'afat refugee camp, demolishing the home of Uday Tamimi, and they are directly linked to what has happened in Jenin, and they are directly linked to the visit of Ben Gvir. It accumulates. It gives for these Palestinian individuals that are part of a resistant movement in the street that has no head. It's a lie to keep linking what's happening to Hamas or to the PA. It is linked more to the violence of the occupation. In a civilized world now, there cannot be any acceptance to a military occupation to another people for 55 years. It should stop. These kind of acts on the ground builds up within individuals within a child like the one in Silwan.
13-year-old and a 21-year-old. Unfortunately, we need to take a break. Mr. Samerson Jalal, thank you very much for your time. Alon Evitar, once again, you're staying with us. Quick break, and we're back.
Thank you.
The Middle East. I-24 News is a witness. Our journalists live and breathe there every day. Get all the latest global news from our studios in Tel Aviv, New York, Washington, and Paris. Anytime, anywhere. Download the I-24 News app, available on Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple, and Google stores. I-24 News, see beyond.
Welcome back to our special edition in the aftermath of the deadly weekend in Jerusalem. I-24 News senior defense correspondent Jonathan Regev with the recap of the events. Let's take a look.
On every other Saturday morning, this would be a quiet street in the middle of a religious neighborhood. The mix of bystanders, eyewitnesses, and security forces this time tell the story of the tragedy happening here last night.
We heard the shots. One of the neighbors told my father to call the police. We then heard more shots and ran to an inner room in the house. The terrorists saw my father and shot into our house.
The terrorists arrived here as people left the synagogue at the end of the prayer and shot everyone around him. The neighbors, hearing the shots, rushed to the scene to help and found themselves in the line of fire.
Our neighbors ran out to help with nothing but their bare hands, and they paid with their lives.
Hours later, as the morning arrived, those living here now have to get used to the reality of yet another terror attack, this time right on their doorstep.
It's so sad. I walk by here every Saturday morning. Things are so different now from my previous walks. It's very sad.
The alert will be raised, police forces will be seen in higher numbers, but in a city where Jewish and Arab neighborhoods are practically one within the other, there's no realistic prospect of stopping every terror attack. And the shooting incident seen this morning in another neighborhood in Jerusalem is the clear example of that. Jonathan Regev, I-24 News.
And naturally, countries around the world are reacting to those vicious attacks. Saudi Arabia's foreign ministry warning this evening the situation may slip into, quote, dangerous escalation, and called for reviving the peace process. Egypt, Jordan, Turkey, the UK, the UAE, France, Azerbaijan, the United States all publicly condemning the EU, urging Israel to only use lethal force as, quote, last resort. Russia calling for maximum restraint, and the Pentagon saying it stays in close contact with the Israeli partners. Let's take a listen.
This is absolutely horrific. Our thoughts, prayers, and condolences go out to those killed and injured in this heinous act of violence. We condemn this apparent terrorist attack in the strongest terms. Our commitment to Israel's security remains ironclad, and we are in direct touch with our Israeli partners, and our thoughts are with the Israeli people in light of this horrific attack.
And still with us in studio, Colonel under Reserves, Mr. Alon Aviatar, and joining us, I-24 News senior correspondent and anchor Hamda Salhout. Hamda, an interesting, I wouldn't say condemnation, but reaction to the events from, again, a surprising entity this past hour.
A surprising release indeed. Iraq's foreign ministry saying, quote, "We condemn the terrorist attack that occurred in Jerusalem and caused the death of injury of several Palestinian citizens. The Iraqi government and people express their solidarity with the people of Jerusalem and demand an end to these hostile attacks." Very interesting verbiage from Iraq. Let me just paint you a little bit of a picture. Now, the two countries don't have diplomatic relations, of course, and in 1948, Iraq almost declaring a war on Israel after its establishment as well. So let's talk about what happened just in last year. May of 2022, Iraq makes it illegal to attempt to normalize with Israel. And just a month later, banning their citizens from talking to Israelis on social media, attending gatherings, perhaps organized by Israelis, and even making it illegal to set foot in an Israeli embassy abroad. These are quite serious steps for a country to take, for one that perhaps they would consider an enemy. So this statement is definitely surprising, to say the least. And in the coming hours, perhaps we'll have a little bit more information. But you'll notice in that statement that I read did not mention the word Israel in that, saying the citizens of Palestine.
Correct. But again, the mere existence of a reaction.
I think those statements, which we heard just now, shows us the, I would say maybe the positive results of the process, the political process between Israel and the Emirates and Jordan and Egypt as well. I think this is
Saudi Arabia.
Of course,
again,
Saudi
not
Arabia.
condemning, but reacting.
So we have, I would say, a new atmosphere, maybe different atmosphere, and I think it's a very good step from them.
And Hamda, earlier today we've been talking about the Palestinian side, the PA not condemning but rather putting the blame on Israel. Are we hearing anything in the past hours from the Palestinian side, let it be Hamas, Islamic Jihad, or the Palestinian Authority?
Well, Hamas and Islamic Jihad were first to speak out last night, praising this incident, saying that the Palestinian people do have this right to self-determination, and they will get it by any means necessary. We did hear from the Palestinian Authority earlier this evening, not condemning, not saying anything, but saying that Israel is responsible fully for this escalation of violence because of their crimes in the West Bank, the occupation, how they treat citizens of East Jerusalem, and they're going on to say that this escalation of violence is probably going to continue because of the measures and the steps that Israel will continue to take. We saw just in the last couple of hours the IDF putting forth new battalions in the West Bank because of this fear of escalation of violence. Several incidents within the state of Israel, within the West Bank, also in the last several hours. We're in for a very difficult time here, and it's really going to be a challenge for the government and how the people themselves are going to deal with it. Netanyahu said himself he doesn't want people to take matters into their own hands, and the Palestinian Authority very interestingly saying that they support the resistance, however, in a peaceful, popular resistance, making note of that word peaceful in their statement. Take that as you will, but it's certainly going to be interesting to see how both the PA and Israel respond in the coming days.
Yeah, and Hamda accurately reminded us earlier this evening that rocket fire from the Gaza Strip only yesterday. Again, it is so difficult to keep track.
Lucky us, we have the Iron Dome.
Right.
So I think that we used to think that Gaza Strip, this is the main threat on Israel, but I think the opposite. The West Bank, this is the problem, and East Jerusalem. Gaza Strip, so far, continue to keep on security stability from Gaza, unless those few rockets kind of symbolize. But I think that Israel should, I would say, rethink about its relationship with Hamas in Gaza, because Hamas try and succeed to, I would say, escalate the territories, the district of Jerusalem and inside Israel, and keep Gaza Strip stable and quiet, but continue incitement, try to escalate over there and put Gaza out of the game.
So keeping Gaza calm, and by that, quote unquote, being the responsible adult Israel expects it to be, but continuing to inflame the ground, so to speak, through the West Bank.
Follow the steps, you will reach to Gaza headquarters, right? To Gaza Hamas headquarters, while we are speaking about incitement and operate from Gaza, those terror cells inside East Jerusalem and West Bank, and I think that Israel should calculate its relationship from the beginning.
So again, the Security Cabinet is convening as we speak. What are we to expect in the immediate level? Alon and Hamda, you will conclude.
I think the security organizations already began. Much of forces in the streets, existence of the policemen, existence of those security guard and so on in the streets, to show that there is a security atmosphere, there is a security feeling, if you want, to calm down the public, the Israeli public, while you don't have any, I would say, clear intelligence details. You cannot fight everywhere and every direction 24/7. You have to calculate your resources and capabilities on the main points, junctions, and so on to avoid deter and to deter also.
Look, you saw last night the Israeli security apparatus was very worried about copycat type of attacks, which is exactly what we saw this morning. And perhaps we will see more of those because of the ongoing security situation.
Yes, and the fear of a third intifada always looming. Hamda Salhout, Mr. Aloni Vitar, thank you so very much for this. And before we conclude this broadcast, let's cross once again live to our 24 News senior Middle East correspondent Ariel Ozron, standing by for us in Jerusalem, near the synagogue where the vicious massacre took place 24 hours ago. Ariel, what are we seeing? Set the scene for us.
Well, the scene is that a lot more protesters have come out, locals, to voice their frustration at Israeli security establishment. As you can hear, there's a lot of chants of death to terrorists, also some take it to death to Arabs. Pretty much until about 20 minutes, it was pretty calm here. There were some chants, but when former Defense Minister Benny Gantz came, that really riled up the emotions here, and people started putting barricades on the streets, trying to block the streets. And this is a developing protest. There's like a cat and mouse game between protesters who are trying to block the streets, police trying to clear the streets, and the bulk of the protesters continue to move. There have been calls that they want to go to the intersection with Bet Hanina, which is the main Arab neighborhood here, to try and block that. But in the meantime here, there's as you can see behind me, they're saying prayers now following the attack yesterday. We're really just a few yards outside the Teret Avraham synagogue in Neve Yaakov, where more and more protesters are coming here to voice their frustration, and some are also calling chants for revenge.
And Ariel, I can assume that the police presence is very much felt there on the ground. The alert level raised to the highest one across the country, not just in Jerusalem, but obviously this is the most volatile area at the moment. The police chief urging citizens to be attentive to any suspicion, yet the Prime Minister reiterating again this evening not to take law into their own hands. Are the guidelines clear enough?
Well, that also will be determined by the decisions from today's Security Cabinet meeting, because that is is expected to include, at least according to leaks ahead of the meeting, easements, making it easier to issue personal firearm license. And so that does stand in contrast with what Prime Minister Netanyahu said. And at the end of the day, with a lot of people here voicing their frustration and saying that they're going with a sense of a lack of security, a lot of them are calling for an increased security presence, more guns on the street. It is ironic, though, when a couple hours ago the mayor of Jerusalem was here and he was asked what needs to be done, he said, we need to remove the guns from the streets. We need to pick up all the guns. I think he was referring to picking up the guns from the Arab population rather than making it more complicated for Israelis to issue firearms. But this just shows the complexity and the tensions that are continued to be rising here this evening in Neve Yaakov.
Indeed, no escape of policy making becomes clear every time a new I-24 News Senior Middle East correspondent Ariel Azran. Thank you very much for this. This is all the time we have for now from the I-24 News Desk. We will be back with more extended news coverage throughout the evening of this deadly weekend in Jerusalem. Until then,